Hello everyone and welcome back to RAID, to the opening panel of RAID discussion. Thank you so much to Commissioner Didier Reynders and Jean-Noel Barrot and Gabriela Ramos for their insightful welcome addresses there. It was great to hear about the role that corporates are playing alongside governments in shaping these multinational agreements, which will be essential for the safety of humanity and the development of technologies globally. And so now we're moving on to the opening panel of the day, which is Shoulder to Shoulder, Tackling Global Challenges Together. And I'm joined by an incredibly distinguished panel here today. RAID is organised in partnership with the Fondation Prospective et Innovation, which is led by Jean-Pierre Raffarin. We're delighted to welcome Jean-Pierre Raffarin here today. He is the former Prime Minister of France, an honorary member of Parliament, and also the chairman of the Fondation Prospective et Innovation. We're also joined by Carme Artigas, the Secretary of State for Digitization in Spain. And Wonki Min joins us from Sungsil University. He's a visiting professor at the university. He's also the former Korean ambassador for science, innovation and technology. So very diverse range of perspectives there, and delighted to be chairing this session. We will be talking about whether the world is fracturing into regulatory zones. Are regulations growing apart? Are they growing together in parallel? And what kind of bridges do we need to make sure that that governance is fit for purpose globally? What are the main points of intersection and divergence between the big pieces of legislation underway in Europe? We've heard about the AI Act, the DSA, and the DMA already. America and Asia. And what role do corporates have in driving positive change? So very, very exciting and important stuff. So Monsieur Raffarin, welcome again to RAID, and thank you so much for joining us. Would you like to perhaps give some opening remarks on this topic?
English, but I think it's better for everybody. I would like to say, firstly, a lot of thanks to Didier Reynders, to Jean-Noel Barrot, to Gabriela Ramos, to participate to this RAID, this new edition for this year. It's very important to have such a beautiful platform to discuss about a very important topic. And this topic is discussing right now by vision, but we will have a meeting in Brussels physically in the 26th September, and we can follow up our discussion in Brussels in September physically, and it will be, I think, a big success. This discussion today is so important. You have seen yesterday Geoffrey Hinton, in charge of AI in Google. He has decided to leave Google to speak freely with a lot of freedom about the danger of AI. And I think it's very important to understand that our world is moving. You know, with the COVID, we have a lot of new things which has emerged. Firstly, all the countries have taken conscience that we need to develop our sovereignty. We need sovereignty, and we need to have in each country a strong sovereignty. And Europe is a good example of this effort with, for example, RGPT, which is a very good initiative to reinforce our sovereignty, to have regulation in this matter. We need about ethics. We need to work about this question about ethics because of all the questions for children, from all the private life, and we have the necessity to have regulation about that. But we can't develop regulation and sovereignty without bridge with the other countries, with the other region, and to discuss together. So that's the main target of the RAID, to have discussion, to build bridge, to have a new vision, a world vision about what regulation is. We need that we will have a lot of progress with uh, IA. It's very clear, but we know also that we have a lot of danger. So we need to have discussion and we need to discuss about regulation. It's very important for everybody. You know, we can have a lot of consequences about the new technologies, about automation and so on. We have a lot of consequences about employment, or about all the private sector and the public question. So that's the reason why we built RED to have this discussion in this platform. So thank you for everybody to participate at this very strong effort to have our good vision about what we have to protect for our country, for our sovereignty, for our people. We have to protect, but we have to develop, and we need discussion for make both. Thank you so much.
I'm very, very grateful to you for your support of RAID and for your summary there of the objectives of RAID. It is so important that we get people from all regions of the world to share not only thoughts but actions about how to tackle the regulation of technology as it develops at such a rapid pace and has such a huge influence over all areas of our life. And we're delighted also to be joined today by Carme Artigas, who is the Secretary of State for Digitization of Spain. Carme, would you be able to give us an overview perhaps of the role that Spain is playing in technology regulation? For instance, I know that you have a national AI strategy and you're the first country in Europe, possibly the world, to have an AI supervisory agency. And also Spain is about to become the president of the EU. So there's a lot of leadership there coming from Spain. So very interested to hear what you have to say about this. Thank you so much.
Very much for inviting me to this excellent event and distinguished panel. So yes, I agree that we are in a moment, as Mr. Raffarin has already mentioned, in a very critical moment on AI development, as we see different trends in different geographical areas. And of course, we can say that we are broadly segmented in regulatory zones. Traditionally, the US has been led by market rules and trade policies that have prevailed to the development of digitalization and technology development. On the other hand, Asia, mostly led by China, regulation is in the hands of the state that defines the limits of the technology and AI applications. And Europe has been seen for the last 3 years as a regulatory superpower, as we were already working since 2019, in thinking that there was a third way, empowering citizens on the use of data, personal data, and starting to work in a future EU regulation on limitation on AI. I would say that now the world has discovered that AI must be regulated, that we cannot just let technology develop by its own without foreseeing the harm and potentially existential harm to the human being in the digital world. We were accused, I would say, that Europe was over-regulating and that could harm innovation, hamper innovation. And probably what has been seen so far as the third way, I would say now we are no longer the third way. We are the only way. There is only a way and we can support technology innovation as long as it is with, I would say, in the favor of people development and not without committing, in meanwhile, rights and principles that human beings have guaranteed so far in democratic values that we have, I would say, enjoyed in the physical world. So we need to guarantee that we keep all those rights in the digital world. This is why Spain has led since already early 2020 the Charter of Digital Rights that has inspired the European Declaration on Digital Principles in the digital era. And I think before starting to regulate something, we need to agree what are we going to regulate. And I think we need to ensure that the human values, the human rights are preserved in the digital world. And as you mentioned, we really support the development of the European regulation artificial intelligence that Spain will have the chance to finish during its presidency as of June. But we have already gone a step forward. We are already setting up the regulatory sandbox together with the industry. What we are doing is anticipating the future EU regulation, starting to work with legislators and practitioners to understand what are going to be the implications for the industry in adapting to the future European regulation on AI. And the target, therefore, is that we finish that legislation process at the end of this year. And in the meanwhile, we are also building, as you mentioned, the first national agency for supervision of AI. We think that there is only not one regulation needed. There's a framework that needs to regulate the development. We have it already in Europe, GDPR, now DSA, DMA, and the future AI regulation. And really the trade-off between regulation and innovation is important, but we can no longer look behind and forget about the serious implication that a world without control on this technology like AI, but future immediate technologies like neurotechnologies or synthetic biology can do, and the harm that we can create, probably we cannot revert it back if we don't foresee it in advance. So I'm really in favor of regulation, but a smart regulation and working together with the industry to set up the controls and set up the limits.
Very, very interesting perspectives there, and great leadership from Spain also on these topics. And so we talked about the question of whether the world is fracturing into regulatory zones, and the consensus seems to be so far that it is. And Mr. Min, Wonki, from Korea occupies an interesting space geopolitically and globally. So, what would you sort of say is happening in Korea in terms of legislating for digital technologies, and also in terms of relations with neighbours in the region?
First of all, thank you for inviting me to this important event. And I think this is a very timely event in the sense that we are witnessing the unexpectedly rapid progress of this generative AI. So we need a framework to address this issue. Most recently, just a couple of days ago, G7 Digital Ministerial meeting held in Japan. The G7 countries agreed to address this generative AI issue in the next meeting. In the meantime, it also demonstrated that it is very difficult to make a consensus how to regulate this generative AI. The technology is moving so fast, and there are so many stakeholders involved in this whole process, not just the government, the corporations, citizens, users, and so many stakeholders are playing in this area. So we need to work together to find a way to move forward and to build a smart regulation on AI. And I would like to stress the importance of the global multi-stakeholder approach. When you look at the current discussion on AI regulation, the discussion is mainly done in the European level and the US and China. But there are many other countries who are also affected by AI technology. And all those countries are also keenly aware of the importance of AI regulation. That's the reason I think it is very important to discuss this issue at the more higher level. So at least in the OECD level, and if possible, in the UN level, to build a kind of common regulatory standard which could be applied to the whole global communities. Korea is one of the countries which actually want to be the leader in the AI technology. In the meantime, it's also very important to take a responsibility as a member of the global community. So we would like to work together with other countries. And I would like to emphasize that Korea is one of very few countries which actually passed the EU's GDPR adequacy test. So we understand very well about the booster effect, and the similar like booster effect if a region or a significant country set up the regulation which actually would apply across the region and border, then most of countries are affected by that kind of regulation. But if those regulations differ and vary across countries, across regions, then the cost will be increased and there will be some discrepancies on these regulatory frameworks. And there will be players who want to arbitrate these regulatory differences. So that is the reason we need to work together in the global level to set up the global standard and global regulatory standard on regulating this AI. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Min, so much for your perspective there from Korea and from Asia. And Monsieur Raffarin, having spent so much time in Asia yourself and specifically in China, what was your perspective here on how Europe can build better bridges with Asia, for example, and specifically China on the technology regulation?
It's very difficult because nowadays political questions are very difficult in all the world. You have war in Europe, and we have a lot of tension between United States and China, and so to have a common vision for our common future about our common planet, also these things are very, very difficult right now. I think that the technology is China will be stronger and stronger, and we have to take account of this development of the technologies in China. We have seen during the COVID that all the sale by net was so strong with big companies like Tencent and Alibaba and so on. So we can't have a world regulation about AI without China. So we need to discuss with China. We need to discuss together. So I think that as our friends Wonki Min said, we need to have a common consensus, and nowadays it's very difficult. That's why our French president, Emmanuel Macron, in his last visit in China, tried to get links about this question, to have discussion, to protect our sovereignty, but also to protect people and to protect human rights. And it's very important. So I think that our challenge is, as Carme said, is to have a smart regulation. What smart regulation? But that's the question. We need to understand that the topic is very difficult, but the relation between countries is also very difficult right now. But we need to do this, and that's the reason why we have to be very smart, because our civilization are different, our citizens are thinking different, and we need to have the protection of citizens all over the world. So that's the reason why it's a very political question. And I think that what said Geoffroy Hinton when he leaves Google is very important. It's a very important man. He has developed AI with Google during many years, and he wants to leave to talk with people about the question and the dangers about the problems about AI. So that's the reason why we need to have diplomatic question, but also citizen discussion. And we need to have a very important discussion in the world. Maybe, we have some consensus in the world right now. For example, the planet is now a political object. When I begin politics, the planet was not a political object. Now, every young people in Shanghai, in Singapore, in San Francisco want to protect planet to protect humanity. It's a world consensus. So don't forget this capacity to have consensus in the world. And I think we can have probably a consensus if we work of that with citizens, how to be a good user of AI to have progress in medicine and so on, in trade and so on. But we need also to be protected and to be protected for all the forces, political forces, economic forces, financial forces, but also all the forces that in the world want to go to some disaster like wars. So that's the reason why we have to discuss with citizens. It's a political question. In every family, we can have this discussion how to be protected by this new progress of technology.
Thank you so much, Monsieur Raffarin, and interesting to hear you highlighting Geoffrey Hinton there, who has just left Google, one of the key pioneers of AI. And we talked a little bit about the role of corporates, and we're very pleased, of course, that the RAID, we do have corporates speaking at the RAID conference. They are very much at the vanguard of not only developing the technologies, but making sure that they are fit for purpose for users and for society. And we'll be hearing more from Meta and Workday and experts at Deloitte on these matters later on. But I'd be very interested to hear, Ms. Artigas, what view you have about the role that corporates can play in driving positive change. You know, Mr. Raffarin was talking about how this is a global issue. These companies are not tied to national boundaries. They do have global reach in the way that perhaps governments do not. So what role do corporates play here?
Well, I really believe that public-private collaboration is a decisive factor in moving towards the most complete and robust regulation possible. We cannot regulate without involving the technology developers on the process and how to implement those regulations that will be very complex. We know that already. The previous experience on applying the GDPR was really painful for many companies, especially small and medium businesses. So we need to understand that regulation must be fulfilled by big companies, but also by small companies, and we should allow them to make it easy. This is the objective of our AI sandbox, to work together, legislators and practitioners, to develop the best practices and guidelines to implement the future technologies. We are in the process of witnessing where the trilogues process are ending up on defining or not if generative AI is considered a high-risk AI system. If you make that question to ChatGPT, ChatGPT defines itself as a high-risk AI application, so I think there is no doubt. So we shouldn't move them the legislation. We should just consider them in the box of high-risk AI and apply all the procedures and methodology. But I think that beyond that, it's not only a question of complying with the law. I'm absolutely convinced that the AI Act, the European AI Act, is not only setting up a technical standard or a legal standard, that it's going to be very difficult that everybody has the same legislation worldwide or the same flavor of the legislation. I think we need to agree on what do you want to regulate, and different countries can have a different way of how to achieve that. But I think the most important thing is that the AI Act is not a technical threshold. I think it is a moral standard. And in some places in the world, that can be achieved through regulation, as in Europe. But in other places in the world, for example, in the US, that sometimes is achieved through, I would say, reputation. So even though this is something that you can do, that it's legal in your country, I, as a citizen, or I, as a consumer, I'm not going to accept that you do this with my data, or that you try to use this AI to generate false information, or in, just harm me, or I would say biased your decision in some way. So I think it's important that we empower citizens on their rights, and that we make conscious that there is also a social responsibility and a corporate responsibility of AI developers and users of this technology in front of their citizens and in front of their consumers, that sometimes can be regulated and sometimes it's just by reputation. The same that happens with climate change or sustainability. If you are a company that is polluting, even then that could be legal in your country, I don't want to be consuming your products. I don't want to be associated with your brand name. And at the end of the day, that creates this global awareness on what is acceptable to do and what is not acceptable to do. I think also the power of the citizens to make changes to corporate behavior. And just an important point here on this role, on the corporate role, is that we have seen that in the past, like GDPR. GDPR initially was a European regulation that sooner than later worldwide companies adopted. And I think that's an effect. We want to think that that is an effect that probably we want to see also in corporations. And the last thing I want to mention is that, of course, the acceleration path of technology also requires a new way of regulation. We need to have regulations that are dynamic. What works today cannot work tomorrow or in 6 months' time. So probably we need to innovate also in the way we want to put this regulation forward.
Thank you very much, Ms. Artigas. Very, very interesting indeed. And you mentioned, for example, the corporate responsibility question and how change is sometimes driven by consumer concerns. Interesting parallel there with the environment, which is of course another sort of existential threat, as you put it, which is very true. And I guess from the point of view of technology, digital technologies, one of the key consumer concerns is to do with kind of privacy, really. And I think that there's a question here about what role does data protection play when it comes to sort of issues around kind of geopolitics as well. And Wonki Min, perhaps this is something you might be able to give a view on, really. How can people have faith that their data is being protected, particularly when there's a need to be able to, how can states can have trust in that the data of their citizens is being protected. It's a complicated topic, but perhaps from your ambassadorial role, I'd be very interested to hear what you have to say on it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That is a very important question, and I do agree with Secretary Artigas and the importance of protecting the right of citizens. And data protection is getting more important with the progress of these generative AI solutions. And GDPR actually plays a very important role right now. And we could use GDPR to regulate the data flow between countries. In the meantime, it's also important to ensure that free flow data with trust can support the innovation of the technology and can increase the benefit of consumers as well as the companies, corporations, which actually plays a key role to make this innovation possible in this digital economy. So I think the balance is very important. The ultimate goal is to protect and individuals and to protect the data sovereignty over data subject. However, if there would be an over-regulation on that, there might be a possibility to stifle innovation in the digital economy. So we need to build a very smart regulatory framework which ensure to protect the integrity of data and the integrity of privacy. At the same time, build a path for the corporations to take advantage of this anonymous data or pseudo-anonymous data to move forward with data innovation. In the meantime, I would like to touch upon the issue on this different regulatory approaches between countries or continents. We actually experienced a very similar thing in early 2010 when there was a discussion on this internet governance issue. There was a kind of a concern we might actually face a kind of situation there would be two different internets. However, with the very multi-level discussions and the discussions which include all stakeholders, we could maintain the single global internet. When we discuss about this AI regulation issue, it's very important to strengthen the discussion among all stakeholders. That is the only way. That is the only way to build a consensus and build a global regulatory framework to regulate these AI technologies. So I would like to once again stress the importance of the global multi-stakeholder approach to address this issue.
Thank you very much, Wonki. And we are delighted now to be joined by Pasquale Stanzione, who's the president of the Italian Data Protection Authority. And I would also like to thank Monsieur Raffarin for speaking in English earlier on my behalf. My French is not so good at all, I'm afraid. But I do gather that Professor Stanzione is going to be speaking in French. So I will, and he would like me to ask a question in French. So please bear with me while I attempt to ask him a follow-on question about the question of data protection, of course. Monsieur Stanzione, bienvenue. Quel est le rôle de la protection des données dans la stratégie numérique européenne?
Cette initiative est importante parce qu'elle a lieu dans une phase historique caractérisée dans le contexte européen par la centralité de l'initiative législative sur le thème du numérique et de sa gouvernance, qui s'est déjà fortement affirmée en 2016, initialement et principalement dans le domaine de la protection des données, là où, c'est-à-dire, les progrès se croisent avec la liberté, la technologie avec l'individu et les marchés avec la démocratie. Ce n'est d'ailleurs pas un hasard si la structure réglementaire du règlement, dans sa méthode et souvent aussi dans sa substance, a été reprise par nombre de réglementations ultérieures sur le numérique, de celles sur la cybersécurité aux plus récentes. Digital Service Act, Digital Markets Act, Data Governance Act. En quelques mois, des mesures très importantes sur le numérique ont été approuvées qui non seulement étendent, bien qu'implicitement, les compétences des autorités de protection des données, mais empruntent également de manière significative bon nombre des instituts centraux du GDPR. Il en va de même pour certaines propositions en cours de discussion, telles que la loi sur l'intelligence artificielle, les règlements sur le targeting politique et la directive sur le travail sur les plateformes. Cette dernière et les actes approuvés représentent, dans un certain sens, la confirmation du fait que le GDPR a été un règlement d'avant-garde, destiné non seulement à s'affirmer au-delà des frontières européennes, comme le démontrent les cas chinois, brésiliens et californiens, mais surtout à se proposer comme paradigme pour les interventions numériques ultérieures. En effet, la prévoyance et la ductilité sont les caractéristiques essentielles du règlement qui ont été ses véritables forces au point d'être sa attractive. Grâce à une combinaison opportune de règles et de principes, de rigueur et de flexibilité, cette discipline, dans le continuum entre la directive mère et le nouveau cadre juridique européen, a en effet permis à la protection des données de remplir au mieux cette fonction sociale qui lui sera ensuite assignée sans équivoque par les considérants 4 du GDPR. constamment en équilibre avec les besoins individuels et collectifs les plus variés, ce droit de la liberté a révélé sa propre force, dans sa douceur, en n'étant jamais tyrannique et en sachant trouver le plus grand équilibre avec les intérêts juridiques en jeu. En commençant par la protection des données, l'Europe a donc voulu offrir aux États membres, mais aussi au monde, un modèle spécifique de gouvernance de l'innovation, basé sur un équilibre durable entre la technologie et la liberté, afin que la voie des néotechnologies ne soit pas socialement régressive. Pour cette raison, le modèle européen de gouvernement numérique a représenté, en commençant par la protection des données, une avant-garde réglementaire qui, à raison de ce que l'on appelle l'effet Bruxelles, a été pris comme paradigme par de nombreux autres pays non européens, le Brésil, la Californie et maintenant même la Chine, bien que dans un système qui est loin d'être libéral. Et l'on peut raisonnablement s'attendre à ce que la vocation des garanties qui sous-tendent la discipline de la protection des données, avec tout son impact en termes de redistribution du pouvoir, ait un effet expansif non négligeable sur d'autres pays également. Mais, bien entendu, comme le montre le cas chinois, l'émulation est différente de l'introjection. C'est-à-dire qu'il ne suffit pas d'introduire un cadre réglementaire plus ou moins conforme à celui du GDPR pour pouvoir garantir l'effectivité et l'applicabilité du droit à la protection des données, qui a nécessairement une dimension publique importante. La protection des données est aujourd'hui un enjeu politique démocratique primordial qui nécessite un système de protection effective et pas seulement formel. Ainsi, la loi chinoise sur la protection des données, bien que digne d'intérêt, ne pourra jamais constituer une protection efficace dans un contexte systémique où les institutions représentatives elles-mêmes ne garantissent pas la démocratie et le pluralisme. C'est pour cette raison que la protection des données n'est pas seulement une discipline, mais aussi nécessairement un système. Comme nous l'enseigne l'arrêt Schrems, aucune garantie, qu'elle soit conventionnelle ou normative, ne peut être considérée comme telle si elle est séparée d'un système complexe de sauvegarde, de contrôle et d'équilibre qui rendent la déclaration normative abstraite opposable à une autorité tierce dans un contexte démocratique. Et enfin, si la protection des données s'est toujours avérée être une condition préalable, incontournable de la liberté, de l'égalité, de la dignité, plus récemment, elle s'avère de plus en plus clairement à être une garantie démocratique essentielle, le barycentre de la relation entre le privé et le public, le personnel et le politique, l'état de la technologie et l'état de droit.
Thank you so much, Professor Stanzione. And it's interesting to hear you highlight the GDPR being at the vanguard of global regulations there, which brings us back, I think, to the question of whether the world is sort of factoring into regulatory zones. Carme Artigas, perhaps you might be able to give your perspective on this topic.
Yes, I think that we have just seen more than 3 types of regulation, 2 areas that were not regulated, like US and China, and third way that was Europe. And I know we see really a positive trend where everybody is trying to put in place different regulations with different focus or for different flavors. We see the AI Bill of Rights in the US. We see how China is very worried about regulating deep fakes. Also Korea, and I welcome the initiative in Korea, and are starting to set the principles for the development of future metaverse, so really anticipating the future threat we are approaching. I think that we should agree to a common ground, and that point of, in that sense, I welcome very much the work that UNESCO is doing in aligning the different multilateral players in this common ground on what to regulate. And as has been already said, the importance of this regulation is that is put in place as soon as possible. We cannot just postpone the regulation. The reason why we were so eager to start starting the AI sandbox in Spain, even before the AI Act is approved, that, as I mentioned, we expect to have a formal agreement by 2027, is because we don't want a 2 years moratorium as it happened in GDPR, because we made it so difficult to implement for small medium businesses that they were not prepared. So really the outcome of that work is to make something tangible and applicable, because otherwise, if we let the small and medium businesses behind, that will harm also consumers as well. What we are seeing, and I think that's important we reflect, is that the same way we need to find a new deal with the citizens on what do we want to regulate AI and how do we involve the governments of the future limits of AI, and how we let citizens take some agency and not only the corporations and not only the governments. I think we also require a new deal with the consumers. We have been too much used that the software industry is throwing up products that are not finished, expecting us to solve the issues that the industry has created. And I think that ChatGPT is an example of an unfinished product, a beta product that has gone from innovation to commercial phase too fast, without controls and limit, and it's like throwing away a drug without approval of the FDA, or taking a pill without knowing the side effects. I think we should not accept that anymore. I think we need to put some more focus in the software industry. If we put it on the food industry, or in the drug industry, or in the automotive industry, it's like selling a car without brakes or airbag. And I think we should ask also from responsibility of the software industry not to throw away the market products that are not finished, or without putting that it is a beta product, and probably we are testing that as the way I can accept to have an experimental treatment. So I think that is posing a lot of challenges. The fact that everybody is concerned about regulation, for me, is a positive thing. Probably we don't agree on exactly the rules, but I think we need to agree on the principles, and I think that's the most important thing.
Yes, thank you so much, Ms. Artigas. I think the issue you pointed out there about consumer safety is one of the main drivers, I think, behind Italy's recent decision to ban ChatGPT sort of fairly unilaterally, really. So I'm going to attempt to ask Professor Stanzione a question about this in French. Quels sont les risques, Monsieur Stanzione, quels sont les risques posés par l'intelligence artificielle générative et le rôle des régulateurs? Pourquoi l'Italie est-elle devenue le premier pays d'interdire ChatGPT?
En ce qui concerne un phénomène fortement dynamique et transformateur tel que l'intelligence artificielle, la discipline de la protection des données offre déjà une réglementation essentielle qui s'est avérée très opportune dans l'attente de l'approbation de la loi sur l'intelligence artificielle. En effet, avec le GDPR et la directive 2016, l'Europe a sanctionné certains principes clés de l'intelligence artificielle, tels que le droit à l'explication, à l'examen humain de la décision automatisée, et à ne pas être soumis à des décisions exclusivement algorithmiques ayant des effets significatifs ou, dans tous les cas, discriminatoires. Ces derniers principes a d'ailleurs été considérablement renforcés par le législateur national en ce qui concerne le secteur de l'application de la loi, précisément pour mieux s'opposer au risque de overpolicing sur la base des caractéristiques subjectives susceptibles de discrimination, telles que, en premier lieu, l'appartenance ethnique. Les obligations de transparence imposées par le GDPR se sont avérées particulièrement utiles pour réglementer un phénomène en évolution rapide comme les intelligences artificiel génératif. Dans le cas du chat GPT en particulier, l'affirmation des obligations de transparence et la vérification adéquate des conditions de licéité du traitement ont permis de réduire les risques qu'une innovation potentiellement extraordinaire comme l'intelligence artificielle générative soit alimentée par l'exploitation indue des données à caractère personnel, même des mineurs. En exigeant le respect des obligations de transparence, de vérification de l'âge du mineur et de licéité du traitement, les Garante italiens a en effet pu attirer l'attention sur la nécessité que le progrès ne s'affirme pas au détriment de l'individu, en limitant sa liberté et en sacrifiant ses droits sur le marché, mais qu'il favorise au contraire un équilibre raisonnable entre l'initiative économique, l'innovation et la protection de l'individu. La loi sur l'intelligence artificielle développe ces principes dans leur sens le plus profond. Faire de la technologie un instrument de promotion de la liberté et non de la discrimination, affirmant ainsi une troisième voie entre le libéralisme américain et l'impérialisme numérique chinois. Avec les principes de transparence, de non-discrimination, de non-exclusivité et d'intelligibilité de l'algorithme, l'Europe entend promouvoir une innovation qui ne soit pas seulement technologique pour éviter qu'elle ne devienne paradoxalement socialement régressive. Le risque, sinon, est que les techniques deviennent de plus en plus opaques et les personnes de plus en plus transparentes, selon cette idée de l'homme de verre cher à des systèmes tout sauf démocratiques.
Thank you so much, Professor Stanzione. And we've just got a few minutes left on the panel, but I would like to remind everybody and to thank everybody for joining today, of course, but to remind everyone that the next RAID conference is face-to-face in Brussels on the 26th of September, and we're very much looking forward to bringing everyone together there. I hope the panelists here today will be able to join us, and of course, you all watching from your offices and your homes today. So on this question of sort of geopolitical alignment, the theme of the conference today is about sort of building bridges and bridging parallel lines. The theme of the conference in Brussels is going to be facing common challenges together. Perhaps would anybody like to give some, perhaps Wonki Min, from your ambassadorial perspective, you might be able to give a perspective on how we can face common challenges together.
Yeah, I think nowadays the digital space is getting more politicized, and you feel the kind of the geopolitical impacts on semiconductor industry and AI. That is the reason digital diplomacy is getting more important, and we need more dialogue between countries and between all stakeholders. And I think EU has a very unique role in this digital space, because EU actually led to build this GDPR and Digital Market Act and Digital Service Act, and they are de facto actually global regulatory framework. And regulating AI, actually, because EU is the front runner to work on this AI Act, and many countries are actually following. So I think EU can take a very important role to facilitate the discussion among all nations and stakeholders, especially when you look at the EU. European Union has a kind of advantage, not having a kind of a specific industry player. This is a kind of advantage and disadvantage. That is the reason EU comes up with this EU Chips Act. So EU also want to build its own regional champions. In the meantime, EU also has a very strong actually advocacy system to protect the citizens and consumers. So I hope that EU can take a kind of critical role and leading role to facilitate the discussion among all stakeholders to find the right way to regulate artificial intelligence. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wonki Min. Yes, you mentioned chips there. It's not just about the platform companies and rivalry to sort of develop technology companies. It's about actually developing the hardware that's required as well. There's a geopolitical angle to all of that. Perhaps would anybody like to give some closing remarks? Carme Artigas, perhaps you might be able to just give us your perspective on how we can face common challenges together.
Yes, as Mr. Min has already posed it, I mean, technology is changing the balance of power, not only between one countries with others that can have a unique technology or unique raw material or unique producing capacity, but also between state players and non-state players like big companies. We need to set up a common agreement for discussion. In the same way, there are commitments for global climate change. Probably had a global conference on digital rights or on limitations of technology. Spain will have an important role during the presidency, and our commitment is to guide those conversations at the European level. But of course, probably that outcome of the Spanish presidency, especially, and how we really land the AI Act, can be an example or can be just a starting point of a more global conversation when we, of course, rely on United Nations and UNESCO and also on the role that human rights have in all this discussion. I think we are in the crossroads, so very important a moment for humanity. I don't want to miss that point. It's the first time where a technology revolution is not only impacting our economy or production model, it's impacting our society, but especially it's impacting the role of human being in the digital world. And I think that poses an existential risk. I think the good news is that ChatGPT has put the alarm. We cannot just sit back and wait. I need to take action. I think that getting this awareness is a positive thing. And don't forget that technology is made by humans, and we are the ones to put the limits.
Thank you very much, Carme, for sounding the alarm there, and we all need to react accordingly. And thank you to all of our panelists today for this fantastic opening panel. We've had brilliant perspectives from France, from Spain, from Italy, from Korea, and globally, and also hearing about some of the concerns of the corporates, which they will be providing their own views on throughout the day. So I'd like to thank you all for joining me on this panel. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll be taking a short break now, and then we'll be back in 15 minutes for panel 2, Artificial Intelligence and Real Applications, diving a bit more deeply into some of the questions that have already been addresses on the opening panel there about artificial intelligence. Looking forward to it. Thanks.